Good morning. I'm Darrell West, Vice President of Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution, and I'd like to welcome you to the 4th Annual John Hazen White Manufacturing Forum. So we are webcasting this event live, so we'd like to welcome our viewers from around the country as well as around the world. We will be archiving the video for this forum, so anybody who wishes to view this after today will have an opportunity to do so through our brookings.edu website. We also have set up a Twitter feed at #USMFG. That's #USMFG. So if you wish to post comments online, you're welcome to do so, raise questions. Sometimes going back and reading the virtual conversation is as interesting as listening to the conversation in the room. So we have several distinguished guests with us today. Our benefactor, John Hazen White, is here, along with his wife Liz and sons John and Ben. So we really appreciate their support in making this forum possible. So please join me in expressing our appreciation to them for their support. So for several years, we have explored different aspects of manufacturing. We've looked at the manufacturing renaissance and what is it that helped bring this sector back. We've studied the obstacles facing the industry and ways to overcome them. And then last year, we examined the Obama administration's focus on regional manufacturing hubs and what they are doing to encourage innovation and to create jobs. So with the comeback of manufacturing and its move into global exporting and advanced manufacturing, we want to focus today on workforce development and the role of community colleges in training the next generation of workers. Where are we going to find the productive workers that businesses need? There's an estimated 2 million manufacturing jobs that are going to be hard to fill over the next decade due to a skills gap. So we have to think about ways to train both the new as well as existing workers in this sector. So today we have a program that will look at several aspects of manufacturing and workforce development. Our first panel will discuss the current and future situation, and then we'll have panels that look at what people in the industry are doing to train workers, and then our last panel will focus explicitly on the role of community colleges and technical schools in workforce development. So to help us think about this topic on our first panel, we have 3 distinguished experts. Dr. DeReon Pollard is president of Montgomery College. In that position, she is committed to empowering students to change their lives. Montgomery is one of the largest undergraduate institutions in Maryland. It has around 60,000 students from 160 different countries across its 3 campuses. She has a lot of expertise on community colleges, both from her personal experience as well as serving on the Future of Community Colleges Commission. The Honorable David Cicilline is a member of Congress from Rhode Island. He was elected to Congress in 2010. There he works on issues related to manufacturing as well as other issues. He has introduced the Make It in America legislation in order to help retrain American workers and other bills to create a national manufacturing strategy. And prior to his legislative service, he was the mayor of Providence for 8 years. Dr. Celeste Carter is the lead program director on the Advanced Technological Education Program at the National Science Foundation. And in that position, she works to encourage a highly qualified entry-level technical workforce. Her program has 21 years of experience in supporting community and technical colleges and other institutions that partner with industry to educate the workforce. So I want to start with Dr. Pollard. You are on the front lines of educating the next generation, and in a recent magazine article, you said that, quote, "Community college is the place where the American dream becomes real." It's a very provocative statement. So first of all, what did you mean by that? And then what is Montgomery College doing to train students for careers in manufacturing as well as other areas?
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and I trust my colleagues to the left and right of me to hit me if I get on my bandwagon, because I happen to think that community colleges are potentially the most transformative institution in contemporary America. We do the work that America needs to have done, and we do it with populations that are oftentimes underserved, underrecognized, and undervalued. I say that very specifically because we serve the working reservist and the returning veteran, the native son and the immigrant daughter. the person who is coming to us to retrain, while at the same time the one who's looking to figure out how to make their lives and themselves better, the single dad and the working mother, all of them find themselves at institutions such as community colleges where we are in fact doing the heavy lifting of higher education. About almost half of undergraduates in this country attend a community college, and the reality about that as our communities and as our country becomes browner, older, and less wealthy in many areas, community colleges are the driving force as an anchor institution in connecting so many needs of the community with the resources that can help propel and drive not only workforce development, but economic development in a community. Montgomery College, as you described, is an extremely large community college. We serve 60,000 students, 3 campuses, 2 educational centers, and dozens of local area sites that we're working. I think our distinctive competency, though, in this space is that we have figured out how to reclaim this work that we're doing in terms of workforce development to drive economic development for our community. We were having a previous discussion before we walked in here, and I said manufacturing in a lot of ways actually needs a branding campaign. We need to figure out how to look at the language. And I'm an English teacher by training, so a part of me thinks about this idea of how we name things, how we look at the vernacular, the lexicon. How do we talk about manufacturing and look at this in a way that has relevancy to an 18-year-old and a 48-year-old who have very different constructs about what manufacturing is, yet and still we have industries that are clamoring for folks to come in and do this type of work. So Montgomery College has done this, I think, in several different ways. One is that we've actually tried to develop several frameworks to help people understand the work that we do. We've defined our workforce development work into 5 specific areas, but we've tightly coupled that with the emerging industries in our community. So for instance, we have we have over 130 programs to study, from short-term certificates to associate's degrees, but we're also looking at in Montgomery County itself, where we have communities that are high wealth and we also have high poverty. All 26 Montgomery County high schools have students at Montgomery College. Every zip code has a student at Montgomery College. That's not the narrative. So how do we bring the counter narrative to the forefront? Part of that is looking at how we partner with the emerging biotechnology community in Montgomery County to look at the entry pathways into technology positions. The reality is that the person who's going to find the next cure for cancer and manufacture that particular type of work is going to have to do that with a very different skill set, but they're also going to need a whole series of people who help them do that work. So there's a very thoughtful process about entryway pathways, helping to build capacity. We're also spending a lot of time with industries who come into us and saying, I have a very talented workforce at my place, but they are retiring. We're needing to upskill. Our industry is changing dramatically. How do you provide training and education for them in ways that can be very thoughtful and relevant? So we're doing that work. And I think the other thing that we're doing is actually inserting ourselves into county and state conversations about economic development and workforce development. It's very comfortable for lots of folks to think about how can we do this work without changing anything. The reality about that, if we want to speak to this national conversation, this global dialogue, a part of what we have to do as institutions is redesign ourselves. I give a plug to Tom's phenomenal book. I have a book club going on at the college right now about how we're doing this type of work at our institution, but challenging the narrative about how we do this work and then tightly coupling with businesses to say, you have this need. The last one I'll speak to and how we're doing this very specifically is also looking at the pathway. And this is something that troubles me a lot. When we have conversations about what's happening in our community, what's happening in our world, we're speaking a lot to the haves. We're not speaking to the have-nots. We have to have very thoughtful conversations about who is not a part of the conversation, who is not excelling in the spaces we need them to excel at. We don't have the luxury right now of waiting for everybody to get to that point. We have to figure out how do we create these pathways from the K-12 space into the community college space, those folks who are coming out of the prison system, how are we working with them? Because as our former governor here in Maryland said, we need everybody to work. And we need everybody to come out and contribute to the bottom line. So how do we make sure that we are looking at the access points for the pathways into this work, but also as institutions, how we redesign ourselves to do that work, and then finally, how we more tightly couple ourselves with industry to make sure we're meeting the goals that they need.
Thank you. You're exactly right. This is a sector that is changing dramatically,
Yeah.
so it does create new challenges for a range of different institutions. So, Congressman Cicilline, you've spent a lot of time working on manufacturing and workforce development in Congress. So, what is the federal government doing to support the training of manufacturing workers, and what should it be doing? Or are there things it's not doing that you would recommend we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, and thank you to the White family for their wonderful sponsorship of this event. Well, I think, first of all, most importantly, continue the policies that are helping to create this manufacturing renaissance. That's a whole range of policies having to do with changes in our tax code, having to do with research and development tax credits, and all the things, ending the offshoring tax credits so that we're not incentivizing companies to move jobs overseas. So I think making sure we continue to maintain a strong demand for American-made goods, modernizing the Buy America programs, a whole range of things that will continue to make sure that there's a great worldwide demand for American-made goods, because otherwise you're training workers for jobs that don't exist.
Sure.
But you're right that there is a huge need for trained workers, qualified workers for this new or more advanced manufacturing. There's a real shift to more highly skilled manufacturing. It used to be, if your mom or dad worked in a manufacturing facility, you could graduate from high school, basically go back to the same big factory where they worked and get a job and make a good living and support your family. That's not the case today in most places. The requirements are for greater skills, in part because of automation and kind of those big factory, big assembly line kinds of operations don't exist as much. And so one of the things that we've done, there are a number of initiatives, the investing in manufacturing community partnerships, the RAMI, those things which Brookings really focused on last year, are helping communities develop coordinated strategies around manufacturing to be sure that we can kind of grow the manufacturing sectors in places all around this country. I really want to just reaffirm we have to continue that. But I think community colleges are really the answer for how do we train this next generation of young people and retrain existing manufacturing workers to meet the demands in the workforce today. And I agree with the president. Part of this is also changing the narrative about manufacturing. People used to think manufacturing is dirty, it's a dead end, the factories are closing, it didn't seem like a bright future. There's been a real change in the attitude about making things in this country, particularly with the maker movement and young people thinking about what manufacturing means. And so I really do think we've got, when some kid comes home and says, I want to go into manufacturing, Mom and Dad, most parents would say, really? And I think we've got to really change that. And that means in high schools and career and technical academies, having manufacturing tracks so that people are starting to develop the skills that they need and young people are exposed to that. We need to continue to fund in a very robust way programs like the Department of Labor and Training has a program in Rhode Island with the Community College of Rhode Island the actual name of it is Pathways in Advanced Manufacturing, Accelerate Pathways in Advanced Manufacturing. It's using the community college to train young people for careers in advanced manufacturing. It has two components. One is a boot camp so that young people can really get exposed to a variety of different things and see what they're good at and what they like. And it's this match of earn and learn model where they're actually earning money, which is a reality for lots of young people at that stage in their lives while they're learning and exploring a career path. So investing in our community colleges and creating this pathway and being certain that in these development of the curriculum and the program that you're working closely with the workforce development boards, the governor's workforce advisory groups, the institutions of higher education. We did pass last year a workforce reform bill, and I think making sure that we are also funding programs like Job Corps and Youth Build and all those early programs that provide people with an early opportunity to try some of the skills that are available in manufacturing. The reason this is all really important is because every manufacturing facility I've ever visited says, I have jobs available. Yeah. I can't find people to fill the position with the skills necessary. And that's even in places like Rhode Island that has a very high unemployment rate. So the jobs are out there. That we've got to make sure that the workforce has the skills necessary and making sure we're listening to and carefully integrating the employers in all of these conversations. Because I think for many years, job training programs were created and produced people for what we imagined existed in terms of demand in the marketplace. And it was sort of stunning to me, the lack of conversation between the employers and the Workforce Development Board saying, what do you actually need? So I think community colleges are absolutely in the place and the institution that can help to transform not only our economy, but not only for manufacturing, but in a much larger way in our economy.
And I think that last point is really crucial. Even in 2009, when we had a 10% national unemployment rate, there were certain sectors that could not fill available jobs, certainly high-tech sectors, advanced manufacturing, and so on. So Dr. Carter, you work on the Advanced Technological Education Program at the National Science Foundation. So what is this program doing to contribute to manufacturing and technical education?
Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Congress, because the reason the ATE exists at the National Science Foundation is because in 1992, the passage of the SETA Act mandated NSF to develop this program that puts community and technical colleges in leadership roles for educating highly qualified entry-level technical people for all of the advanced technology fields. The program has about $66 million a year. We make anywhere from 50 to 75 awards a year, going to not just community and technical colleges, although they have leadership roles on all projects, also to grades 7 through 12. So the idea of pathways was very important, and four-year institutions. Every single award that's made has to have significant industry collaborators or partners. And an additional point is to work with your regional workforce investment board, or WIB, or your economic development agency. So this is truly a program that's now been around for 21 years, supporting a highly qualified technical workforce. And about, I would say, close to somewhere between 30 and 40% of the awards we make each year are related to advanced manufacturing. If not very specifically, we are developing at Community College X a new mechatronics program in collaboration with our industry partner. There's a lot of the supporting roles that are played. Nanotechnology is one of the ones that is certainly active and participating in advanced manufacturing. We have biomanufacturing, biotechnology. Optics and photonics isn't maybe one you would naturally think of, but there's laser-enabled manufacturing, and we have centers and projects funded in that. Rapid prototyping, or 3D printing. So this is a program that really pushes the community to think about how to effectively partner with your industry and your economic development people to build a program, or it could be a certificate, it could be an associate's degree, some sort of a pathway, and then also provide faculty professional development and teacher development so that the people who are in those classrooms actually understand what they are doing and why they are doing it, how relevant it is to the jobs that are available to students that are going to be graduating from these programs. So this is one of those programs that truly is responsive to the exact topic that we're talking about today. And really, we've covered every state in the United States, the territories as well. Pretty much, we're working on one new area of, well, it's been around now since 2009, trying to bring more of the community and technical colleges into the program. There are approximately almost 1,200 community colleges. And we've reached, I would say, between a third pushing towards a half. We have an area in this program called small grants for institutions new to the ATE program. So it has to be a community college that has either never come in to this program before or hasn't come in 10 years. And that grows the diversity of the program greatly. I'd also like to mention that, community colleges are the entryways, right, for a huge number of students. Whoever walks through the door of your classroom is who you're going to serve. And so you have it's a tremendous opportunity to reach a lot of the underrepresented populations in the science, technology, and engineering math occupations. Approximately, I think, more than 50% of the Latino or Hispanic students are at community colleges. It's very close to that for African Americans. It's a great way to broaden participation and to reach some of the populations that we need to reach. So that's the ATE program. And another program that I talk about a lot with community and technical colleges is another congressionally mandated program. It's called the STEM Scholarship Program. And it's one that Congress looked at H-1B visa money and said, gee, here's all of these industries and corporations that say they can't find a qualified person in the United States. Why don't we take some of those funds that they are paying for visas and use it to develop a program to support growing the population of people in the United States who would be highly qualified. So it's academically talented, financially needy students. And when I talk to a large population of community college, either faculty or presidents, I say, how many of you have that type of student on your campus? And every hand goes up in the room, right? So that's another program that is really supporting this work. A lot of people that come into ATE will say, how can I support some of these students? I'll say, leverage this, use what you're developing with the ATE money, but go look for one of these scholarship awards as well so that you can support these students and bring them in. So I think that kind of gives you a basis of what ATE is about and some of the things that the National Science Foundation is doing.
Sounds like you have lots of new initiatives going on. So I'd like to throw out a question to each of you on the panel. And I know you're kind of coming from different perspectives. And then after this, we'll open up the floor to any questions and comments from you. So the question is, what are the biggest barriers that you see in terms of workforce development, and how can we overcome them? And this can be in terms of government policy, college curricula, how to deal with underserved populations. Congressman Cicilline, you mentioned the maker movement. Like, are there civic organizations that should be doing new or different things? Dr. Pollard, I'll start with you. Barriers and ways to overcome them.
So I think there are probably, in my mind, 3 or 4 broad barriers, and I won't speak to all of them because I think the other panelists are probably more qualified to speak to them, particularly in terms of some of the policy issues and legislation that could help provide this. I think, as I said earlier, I'm an English teacher, so I spend a lot of time thinking about words. And one of the things that strikes me is that we have to have a substantive conversation about what it means to go to college, right? I am always struck when I have an 8-year-old son, and he knows he will no longer he'll be second generation college student from my family. And what I find very provocative about that is that he says to me, Mama, but what is college? So we have to talk about what college is and what that means. But this idea that you go to college to earn an esoteric degree that has no relevancy or currency in the workforce, I think is an old trope that we have to figure out a different way of thinking about it. The reality is that you come to college to learn a skill set that will help you get a job. And oftentimes, you have to get a job to pay for the tofu. I had a friend who told me that not too long ago. The reality about it is that you also have to have a job that's going to help you be sustainable. And those jobs are going to require you to go to a place that has relevancy, that has currency, and that has connections to the workforce and the community that you live in. So we have to really start talking about the fact that you don't have to go to college. What you have to do is you have to go and get an education that will allow you to be successful, and the way that you can do that is through college. It doesn't mean you have to go away to some of the best prestigious institutions in our country. You can do that. You can also come to your prestigious community college locally and get a curriculum that's going to allow you to get a job that will allow you to go debt-free and allow you to be able to make a relevant change for you and your family. So I think we have to have a substantive conversation about what education means, what going to college means, what workforce development means. It's quite du jour right now. Everybody's in vogue to talk about workforce development. And it's talking, oh, wow, community colleges, we've been doing this for 100 years. I mean, it kind of baffles me that, over 100 years, community colleges have been doing workforce development. For over 100 years, we've been helping drive economic development, and all of a sudden, somebody finally said, wow, we've been doing apprenticeships. We've been doing this work and operating in this space, but the problem is that the cultural narrative, the cultural conversation hasn't kept in track with what we've been doing. I'll also say that community colleges have not done a very good job of talking about what we do. And we also have to bring more to the table in terms of describing the evidence to say that we're doing that particular type of work. So that's one broad area. The other area is that we have to have a substantive conversation in this country about the inequity that exists in terms of the socioeconomic gaps here in our country, and how do we begin to build pipelines to ensure that every child, every adult has the understanding that there's a space and place, there's a need. I heard Secretary Perez say there are no surplus Americans. So I would offer to you, there should not be any surplus Americans who can't find work and relevant ways to support them and their family, but also there should not be surplus industries, right? So we need to recognize that every industry, if they're a part of the economic driver of this country, needs to have people who can go into that and be qualified and talented to help drive that work. So I think there's a combination of issues there, but I think we have to have some authenticity in our conversations. You know, I mentioned earlier, I'm from the south side of Chicago, and we believe in a couple of things. One is that you work hard, but you got to play hard. And part of that is speaking truth. And part of that is making people a little uncomfortable. And part of that is also recognizing you got to do some things a little bit differently if you want different results. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Great point. Congressman Cicilline, what are the biggest barriers you see and how could we overcome them?
I think Dr. Wall is absolutely right, particularly about this idea of rethinking and re-engaging in a conversation of what kind of college is. You know, I think for a long time in this country, I mean, I remember when I was mayor, we'd go into classrooms of second and third graders, and the principal would say, who's going to college? Is everyone going to college? Raise your hand. I'd say, stop doing that. You know, everyone is not going to college, and stop suggesting to these kids that if they don't go to college, somehow they're not successful or they can't have a productive and meaningful life. And I do think that we have got to, you know, begin to have a conversation in this country about what the purpose of post-secondary education is. You know, for a long time, you didn't even talk about a job. It was like you went to be educated.
Right.
And it's like, you know, if you were, oh my God, you know, it's like, no, actually you want to be able to support and sustain yourself and eat and house yourself. So this idea of connecting it to some real world requirements and preparation for the workforce, I mean, we've got to really have that conversation. And I think what I see as the biggest barrier, or the biggest obstacle, is access to education, whether it's to the community college, whether it's to a workforce training program, whether it's a spot at the Job Corps. We just don't have enough access, which is why I think the president's proposal for a free community college is so exciting, because it will really change, you know, it will sort of move what we now expect as K through 12 education as a public function that everyone has access to for free, and make it K through 14, which I think is consistent with the demands of the world in which we live. And so ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to access free community college, who then can make decisions about whether it's manufacturing or another career path, I think will do more than just about anything else we can do. So I think it's access to the education and training that is necessary for the jobs that we're speaking about that is the single biggest obstacle.
So, Dr. Carter, your views on the barriers and the remedies, and then we'll get questions from the audience.
All right. So I'd like to step back to the public perception, because I think that is really a tremendous barrier still in a lot of these programs. The ATE program has been supporting the development of these types of programs now for 21 years. They exist at multiple community colleges across the United States. And I will say that one of the things that happens, and this is typical of every community college, when there's an economic downturn, the enrollment at a community college goes up. Mm-hmm. As the economy returns, the enrollment starts going down. So that's pretty typical. That you can see that cycling across the country. But one of the things that we've seen happen with a lot of these programs is, without an understanding of what the career pathways are about, the students, even if they know about the program, don't enroll. We have one center in Albuquerque that's called the MEMS Center, or Micro Electrical Mechanical Systems. So people say, well, what is that? What do they do? Well, you could say, well, things, you know, there are things like putting DNA on a chip to understand and diagnose diseases. There's a huge role for that. This program has been around for quite some time. For years, they were lucky if they had 6 students enrolling in the program. They had industry waiting at the door to take the people and hire them and get them into these positions. So a lot of that is perception. So I still think that idea that it would be great to have some big PR firm step up and say, let's re-envision and let's make a change. I know the state of North Carolina did that with biotechnology. One of the community colleges, Alamance Community College, had a program that had been kind of limping along with not very many students every year. North Carolina started putting up billboards saying biotechnology is our next economic driver. And since that time, that program is over-enrolled. people got the idea. They started looking up and figuring out what does it mean to have a career in biotechnology. I think it's something we really need to think about broadly across all of these advanced technologies, from manufacturing to, high-tech welding to all of these various things that are going on in the United States.
Okay, so our panelists have put a number of ideas on the table. We'd like to open the floor to any questions and comments from here. Right here we have 2 questions, so we'll take each of you. We have a microphone that's coming over to you. If you can give us your name and your organization.
Hi, thanks very much. My name is Mindy Reiser. I'm a sociologist, and I'm on the board of governors of an organization called LERA, the Labor and Employment Relations Association, which has had many discussions on these topics. I'd like you to think about and address, if you could, 2 points. One, how the role of MOOCs is transforming what education means, where it's delivered, and how industry itself can liaise with community colleges in delivering that. And also senior citizens in this country who often are not in economically great shape and need work and need new training. How are you beginning to address that population? Often you're focusing on young people at the beginning of their work lives, but we need to think about the other end of the work trajectory and how to reach those people. So your thoughts would be welcome.
If you don't mind, I'll start with the last question first, because I think one of the things that's very distinctive about community colleges is that, I like to think that we are engaged with a human's potential from cradle to grave. So the reality is the average age of my student is 28 at Montgomery College. This year we had graduates who graduated who were 72 years old from Montgomery College, and it was a beautiful thing to watch them walk across the stage, but also see them pointing to their child who was also earning a degree and their grandchild who was there who's also a student at Montgomery College as well, and to talk about what that meant for their family, changing the trajectory of a family at that particular point. In fact, one of our speakers was a coal miner from West Virginia who heard about our HVAC program at Montgomery College, moved to Montgomery College, had an apprenticeship with one of our local companies, and is working through and was one of our distinguished speakers at our commencement program. He had a lot of national press because he talked about this idea that people thought that I was down and out, and here I am doing something very different and changing the narrative for his entire family. So I think your work, your comment is very powerful. I'd like to think we already do that work in community colleges. In fact, the American Association of Community Colleges has a whole initiative on 50 plus, where they have provided grants to a number of colleges across the country to help target very specifically this population of seniors who are transitioning out of formal work, or those who are having to extend their work life because of circumstances of their lives and other things. So I think we do that very well. If that's a distinctive competency of community colleges, I think that would be one that would be recognized. The other thing about MOOCs, I think is an interesting conversation. I think that it certainly is providing this access question that we talked about. What I'm seeing, though, at our institution, and we're actually seeing this in higher education, there was a great piece, I think, in the Chronicle a couple weeks ago that actually talked about this idea that MOOCs are a way of providing an entree point for many people, but the reality about that is that for a lot of our students who come to community colleges, what they need is support services as well, and then how do we put that particular MOOC and couple it with support services, but also other classroom experiences that helps a student really connect all of those things together, and how do employers start to look at this type of work. So this whole question of credentialing and more badges and other types of things, I think there's a broader conversation that's out there about that. I have not seen the MOOCs have that type of impact yet in the workforce. I haven't heard that from my local employers who I spend a lot of time with, but I'll certainly pose that question to them.
And the other thing on MOOCs is they attract a lot of students, but the completion rate is 5 to 10%.
Right.
So.
And I would say, rather than looking at a MOOC, one of the things that has come about in the ATE program is people developing hybrid courses.
Yeah.
So for greater access for everyone, whatever you want to consider it, a lecture part, whether you're doing a flipped classroom, whatever
Right.
your pedagogical strategy is, you engage students broadly, but then there's some central site where once or twice a month, everyone shows up on a weekend, and they actually get the hands-on skills and competencies. And part of that, especially around advanced manufacturing, it's the skills and competencies that really make a difference between a person who's finished a 4-year degree where they have not had a lot of those experiences, and a student who's had both the sort of academic rigor of the coursework along with gaining those skills and competencies. It makes them a better candidate for the job.
We have a gentleman right here who has a question.
I'm Randall Doyle. I'm Georgetown University. I taught at the university level for many years, and then I taught at the community college level, and I was stunned to find out that 90% of the faculty is adjunct and underpaid. And I hear what you're saying, and the programs sound great, okay? But what I discovered from working at a community college level was tremendous resentment that when 90% of the faculty are working for crappy wages, no health care, and then they're expected to carry out these wonderful agendas and so forth, to me it doesn't make any sense. I think one of the weaknesses, I agree with President Obama's community thing, free community college, it's all great stuff, but what about the other half of hiring a faculty, paying them a living wage, giving them health care and so forth, and making the place more professional for the faculty to be there? Because I can tell you, having been there myself and everything, that there is tremendous resentment and anger and so forth when basically a handful of people are making a living wage and everybody else is working for crap wages. So, I think to implement these programs that have a higher success rate in some of these programs and so forth, I think that if you flip that and had 90% of the faculty actually making a wage, showing up to work and so forth, instead of looking over their shoulder trying to figure out how to pay their bills, I think you'd have a greater commitment by these people toward these programs, toward these schools. Now, I don't know how the president's going to get around that and so forth. You can offer free education, but for God's sake, I mean, if you want quality people to implement these programs, you got to pay them. You got to pay them a living wage.
But remember, the president's proposal is not that the students show up and it's free. It's that it's being paid for by the federal government and the state. So presumably, it will have no net effect on the cost to the community college because they'll receive the same tuition and fees. It just won't come from the individual, it'll come from the government. I think your point is a broader one, that we have to put community college leadership and community college teaching in the same category that we do with four-year colleges and universities, and to the extent that we can ensure people have good pay and permanent positions. And I think, again, that requires an additional investment in community colleges, which I'm a strong supporter of, and I think good community colleges do that already. Not every community college does it, but...
Well, and let's be real, we can't afford it. So if you want, I'll put it out here, and this is and I had this conversation. I'm the only community college in the state of Maryland where I have my adjunct faculty who bargain collectively. And we sit across the table and have some real hard conversations. And here's the hard conversation about it. We're not funded to do that. And the design of how community colleges started 100 years ago, and probably most recently in the 60s and 70s, it was designed, adjunct faculty had a very distinctive purpose. It was to provide flexibility for the schedule, to allow us to make sure that we can offer courses throughout the day at times and places to meet the community's needs, and secondly, to provide relevancy for the curriculum. So I'm able to bring in a master HVAC person to come in and work, who can work alongside our full-time faculty to provide a compilation of skills and experiences for a student, if that's what it was designed to do. But what happened, now if you want to get real, let me put my pad down here. Is that
Now we're getting serious here.
So the serious fact is that we have continued to see an underinvestment, in some cases a disinvestment, if you look across the nation, in higher education. Mm-hmm. So as a result of that, we had to do, folks keep saying, community colleges, open your doors, send me your tired, we're sending our tired, our huddled, our folks who need more resources to you, who demand and need more from you. We're going to send them to you, but guess what? In the state of Maryland, I'm going to give you, for every dollar I give to USM, I'm giving you 18 cents from the state of Maryland. So let's keep it real, right? So at the end of the day, what you have created is, in some cases, a perceived caste system where you have full-time faculty and part-time faculty, but the design was never intended for that. So now, as a result, colleges say, how do I get wise about this? I've got these thousands of students who are coming to us because the economy is getting bad, so I'm going to hire more adjunct faculty because it allows us to be flexible, it allows them to be able to do these types of things. The reality is we want to have a substantive conversation about labor policy in community colleges. It's a much bigger one than simply saying to us, how do you begin to just put more, because we don't have the money. We simply don't have the resources.
Yeah.
Fundamental shift in how
Fundamental.
I agree.
Fundamental.
Okay, there's a woman right here in the aisle who has a question. Yep. And give us your name and organization.
I'm Monica Herc from the Committee for Economic Development, and my question doesn't quite reach the same level of passion, but
I'll take some water now.
Yeah.
But some of the answers may, you never
Yeah.
know.
yes,
So-
we'll see. So Dr. Carter was talking about the MEM degree and how employers were lining up for it and putting up billboards about that. I'm wondering if there's a role for more counseling when students come into community colleges to say to them, you know, given your aptitudes and interests, you know, there's employers in this community who are hiring for this job. You could finish this degree, and this is what you're likely to make when you walk out the door.
I would love to see that happen. And typically what happens, I used to go down, I had a biotechnology program in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was a faculty member at Foothill College. And I had the same problem getting students through the door each year. I would go in, my dean every spring would say, well, you know, your program is redlined. You ought to have people, you know, coming out the door, and there's over 1,200 biotech companies in the area. Why aren't you over-enrolled? But there was no public relations or advertising about the program. Everything falls on the faculty member to do. And I would go to the counselors every year with a binder. I would say, here's the companies that have hired, this is their entry level, you know, this is their entry level pay. I would find out later that what they would tell students is, oh, you know, this is science, it's really hard. You should go into the liberal arts. You don't really have the aptitude to do this. And that wasn't true at all. It really wasn't true. So one of the things I finally wised up to, I actually had a student push me to do this, was she said, I'm taking a marketing and PR class here. Why don't you go talk to the faculty member who's teaching it? Every single student in the class has to develop a marketing PR plan for some entity. So I ended up with 2 students who got me free radio spots on the Stanford radio station, free spots on the San Jose Public Television station, targeted mailings to high schools and other entities around the area, and posters even for on the campus, because students there didn't even know there was a biotech program, even though it had been around for 13 years. And I tell that story on myself, and I say I was the one who didn't think of doing that. It was a student who pushed me to do that. So counselors are just one aspect of it. There's a whole realm of other things that need to happen to keep getting students aware of and coming into these programs.
Can I just add one thing? And that counseling demand actually exists at the high school level too. I mean, the conversation should actually be happening as people are concluding their high school education, so they can have conversations about community college or about career pathways. There's been, unfortunately, a real reduction in the availability of counselors at the high school level too, and
Right.
I think that's
Right.
exacerbating the problem.
There's a question of a woman on the aisle right back there. Yep.
Hi, Hannah Hodel, U.S. Department of Education. Thank you for coming to speak here today. You talked about the importance of changing the narrative of manufacturing so that it's multi-generational and targeting underserved and undervalued populations. At present, women make up less than a third of the manufacturing population. How do we get more women interested in staying in manufacturing jobs?
So I can speak to that a little bit. We actually have a couple of very, very active projects that are deliberately going out and coming up with recruitment materials specifically to attract women into these jobs. One of them is based in California. The principal investigator is Donna Milgram, and she literally works on bringing women into all of these career spaces very, very successfully. She's now partnering across the entire community college ATE community, bringing in the techniques and the sort of how do you model things appropriately. So that's one thing that happens. I do also remember talking to a dean in engineering, and he said, you know, we did a summer boot camp for women, and man, every single one who went through that boot camp showed up in the first semester class for engineering, and by the end of the first semester, not a single one was left. And he went into the classroom and watched them, and he said, look, you know, I'm from the military, I've got a military background. He said, one of the things we do in the military is we videotape people as they teach. so that we can go back and say, now you may not have perceived that you were giving this message to some of the people in your audience, but you were. He said, I'm going to try that. I'm going to see if that turns things around, because it was the instructors that were providing the wrong message once the women got into the classroom. Unfortunately, he hasn't come back, so I don't know how successful it was. I'd love to know.
I would offer a couple other things to add to that. One is that we have to start earlier having these conversations. I love the conversation it was earlier that the representative talked about of saying, let's take this to the high school level. I last week was talking to a group of fifth graders, and the reality is we have to start talking earlier and earlier about what it means to be educated, what's the public good versus the private good, but also to talk about this idea that everyone needs to see themselves represented in the workforce in that way. And I think for us who do the hiring within our institutions, we have a strong commitment. And I look at an engineering program. We have the largest community college transfer engineering program in the country. We send students from directly into industry, but also we had students graduate and go from Montgomery College to MIT last year. The reality about that is that we have hired faculty who look like the students that we serve and who are able to talk about how you navigate an experience that may not be something where people are giving you the messages that you can be successful. And then I think the other thing that we're doing is how do we also then with our students create support services, learning communities, other things to help them be able to say, let's be very thoughtful and intentional about your experience. You're going to have a panelist later who's probably going to talk about this, these pathways and intentionality and how we systematically redesign our organizations to get these outputs. We don't have the opportunity just to wait for it to happen. I call it intrusive, deliberate, and making sure that we systematically look at all of the inputs to get the outputs that we need to have.
There's a question over here. Did you have a question? Yeah, right here on the aisle.
Thank you. Ariane Higovish, Institute for Women's Policy Research. I also had the women's question, but you kind of answered it. My other question is, manufacturing in our space is very much targeted as good middle skill jobs where you do not need a full degree. But then from your discussion, a lot of the emphasis is on advanced manufacturing. It's not your father's manufacturing job. You can't just walk in with a high school degree. So how much is it still a kind of an occupation which allows people who do not get a 4-year college, maybe don't even get a 2-year college, to get in and get a decent job? And how does that also, this overall emphasis on getting more skilled workers, how does it align with the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, the emphasis on really low-skilled, disadvantaged workers?
So if you don't mind, and I'm happy to be quiet on this issue, I'll give you an example of what we've done with this right now in cybersecurity. We were very lucky to receive, for the state of Maryland, and we're hosting it, a grant, one of the tech grants, where we're looking at this whole issue of cybersecurity. And what I think is very interesting about this is that for a lot of folks, when we talk about this, your question struck me. Do you need college? I think we have to get out of our head this idea that college is a 4-year baccalaureate degree, that is no longer a definition that's viable. College, I love how post-secondary higher education has many outlets. You can get short-term certificates, long-term certificates, associate degrees, baccalaureate degrees, and to be quite frank, in our biotechnology program, 60% of the students who are coming to get a certificate in biotechnology from Montgomery College already have a baccalaureate degree. 40% of them already have a master's degree with unqualified skills to allow them to step into a workforce. So I think we have to, again, it's not only the narrative, it's the lexicon, it's the vernacular that we use around what it means to go to college. But what we've done with this TAC grant in cybersecurity is to create on-ramps so that people can come in and get short-term certificates and degrees, short-term certificates, go into the work, come out, come back in, and then begin to create stackable credentials to allow them to move into a workforce. That, to me, has to be the way we have to think about this. A high school diploma is very powerful. That should be the minimal expectation that we have for education. The reality is that anyone who's going to be able to have a sustainable living wage, Montgomery County, for a family of 4 to live without any financial support is $80,000 a year. You will not find a job with a high school diploma doing that in Montgomery County. So we have to have a substantive conversation about how we create credentials to get you to that level.
I like that concept of stackable credentials.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not new.
In the very back, there's a one with her hand up. There's a microphone coming over to you.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Robbins, and I'm an independent consultant working on various issues of access to justice and opportunity. And one of the two questions that I had, and they've been somewhat addressed. One is the issue of online universities and education and how you blend that into what you're doing. And I want to back up. I used to run a program here in DC called Maya Angelou Public Charter School and See Forever. And one of the things, it was an alternative school, and we sent our young people off to college many years at a rate exceeding 80 or 90%, and these were children who had been pushed out of public schools. So it's clear that when you set high expectations, you can have extraordinary outcomes. So the question I have is around stigma. I think that a lot of people think of community college and they think, you know, you didn't really do it.
Yeah.
You didn't get where you needed to be, and there's all this focus on trying to get into four-year colleges. So I just asked something about, and I love the stories that you shared about your public relations efforts, and I think that on the issue of stigma, that would be a real place that across the nation, there could be some real new thinking about community colleges. I love the name of them, right? So there should be an appeal. But right now, I think for too many, it's seen as the fallback failure spot and not the catapult and catalyst for you going on to broad, extraordinary educational experiences. So a little bit about how you might change stigma into, you know, stepping stone and wonderful, you know, staircase to glory kind of thing.
So maybe I could start on that because that is something that comes up a lot. But to go back to, it's Collins who has your biotech program.
Yes.
And I had a biotech program. And I would say over 15 years, I probably had less than 10 students that were entering with a high school degree only. So I had people with PhDs, with masters, with bachelor's degrees. Another biomanufacturing program at Solano Community College in California, 80 to 90% of their entering class each year has a recent degree from the University of California, a baccalaureate degree. They can't get a job.
Yep.
Industry tells them you don't have the competencies and skills that you need. So one of the things we started doing was referring to ourselves as the reverse articulation pathway. So, and I'd have students come in and they'd say, well, you know, every single thing in your program doesn't transfer for credit. So I'm not going to take everything in your biotech program. I'm not going to finish your certificate. I'd say, that's fine. You transfer. I'll see you when you finish your 4-year degree because you'll be back. And one of the things that people have been doing is building these, truly a pathway with multiple on-ramps and off-ramps. And that's one of the things that is truly being successful. And I think as far as the high school piece of it, it's looking at dual credit. There's more and more people thinking about how to be creative about that. How do you actually get a pathway? So one of the things that happens in a lot of these disciplines as well is students are bored with a lot of the entry classes. You know, it's like, in biology, it's like, come on, you expect me to memorize all 1,200 pages of Campbell's textbook? And, you know, how boring can that be? So one of the things that people are doing is sort of shaking up the system, thinking about how to create pathways that allow students to see you could do a certificate. Matter of fact, I used to get people hired out of my program, which my administrators didn't like very much because they said we can't get that completion number. But industry would say, as soon as you get this base level of competencies, I'm taking you. And I hired as adjuncts a lot of people from industry to come and teach technical courses at night. And they would literally cherry pick out of my program. And I always figured that since the students came to get a job, that was a good thing to do. But it's letting students know all of those options and building those options into it. One very successful program is a learning community that was initially developed at the City College of San Francisco and has now been adapted and adopted in a lot of other communities, community colleges across the United States, that partners 3 courses. It just links 3 courses up in one semester of an understanding of biotechnology, the math you need to be successful, and the writing and English skills you need to be successful. And that learning community alone has transformed entry into a lot of these programs. So other people are adapting and adopting that model as well. And so I think that however you refer to it, I visited Australia and looked at their technical institutes. They have a one-page flyer that says in every single occupation, if you finish this certificate, this is the jobs you can look for, and here's your salary. If you later come back and you get the next certificate or certification, these are the jobs you can apply for, this is your salary. And it builds all the way up into mid-level administration within a lot of the industries. And I think that would be a great thing to develop here.
Okay, I think we have time just for one more question, then we're going to move to our next panel, and right here on the aisle. Yeah, there's a microphone coming over to you. This is the last question, so it has to be a really good question.
No pressure.
Hello. I'm Hayden Springer. I'm with the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, and this is a bit of a different question. You mentioned a number of important things to you, delivering programs that give people the skills that are in demand, identifying career pathways, helping teachers understand why what they're doing is important, and giving schools the funding that they need. So we work a lot with workforce and economic development professionals as well as TAC grant folks to know how to access and interpret data. And we find that skills data is majorly lacking, that it's very difficult to identify good career pathways without that data, and that BLS funding is declining and it's trickling down to the states as well as the community colleges. So what I'd like you to address is how are you dealing with these issues of lack of data in developing your programs?
Actually, that's a great closing question. Yeah. Panelists?
I would say, you've worked with the TACT grantees. So one of the things that every single awardee under that program from the Department of Labor had to do was figure out a way to try and get those metrics. And sometimes you can look at unemployment data. Sometimes, as you say, BLS data helps. One of the things that the ATE program is helping to support is a study at the National Academies that's ongoing right now on middle skills jobs. We just had a convocation on that a week or so ago, and there was a lot of discussion about what data sets can be accessed and what they show. It's a tough problem. It is a tough problem. I think the ATE program, in a way, gets around that program problem by developing those really close ties with industry, so that the community and technical college working in partnership with industry, be it one company or multiple companies in a region, really understands what's going on there and can build the kind of program that provides the needed skills and educational background that people need. Is that an answer nationally? I don't know. One of the things I'm trying to do is to get regional centers to work together on a national level. By developing called coordination networks within this program. And we'll see if maybe that helps the issue. Another one is to look at things like what the Manufacturing Institute is doing in pulling together all of the industry-validated certifications and then looking at how they can be interwoven into academic programs. This is one thing that Jennifer McNally, the president of the Manufacturing Institute, has worked with the Florida Manufacturing Center that's supported by ATE. And every manufacturing and engineering technology program in the state of Florida has interwoven into every program industry-validated certification so that a student knows when they come in, they'll be prepared to take an exam. If they have that certification, they know the jobs that are available. So things like that, I think, help, but it doesn't necessarily give you the kinds of database and statistics and metrics that you asked about. But I think that's the best I can do.
So pragmatically, I think related to that, one is that we're trying to build our own capacity in this space. So that means as community colleges, we're having to redirect our own internal resources. So instead of hiring X position, I need to build research capacity. I'm going to redirect the positions in that area. Secondly, we're outsourcing it. Plain and simple, we're going to find people who can collaborate with us, who have competency, outcomes they can demonstrate and say, hey, we can bring this skill set to you and allow you to be able to help purchase that from you and contract it as a service. We're doing that. Third, we're trying to figure out how can we get regional partners who can come together and help us say, here's where this space is. Fourth, we're pushing the government. You're asking us to say you want this type of data from us. The reality is that there was a great piece today about the FAFSA. You know, there's certain parts of the FAFSA we just shouldn't have to fill out because the IRS already has this data. It's kind of the same thing. You're asking us to present this type of data. The reality at the end of the day is that you should be able to provide it to us and help us do the analysis around it. So I think those are some of the spaces we're doing that work in. And the last one is that I have a business roundtable where I bring business leaders together, and one of them actually said, Darian, I'll do that for you. And that to me was a very powerful conversation to build that capacity that there's a deep investment in our success because they already have the business metrics and know-how to do that work to be able to help us bring that model into what we do.
Okay, we're out of time on this panel. We're going to move right into our next panel, but a great job. I'm going to thank Dr. Carter, Dr. Pollard, and Congressman Sisson.
Thank you.